Once a man was sure that the sun revolves around the earth, and the earth rests on elephants, turtles, whales. It was dangerous to imagine the world any other way. Well, how could ancient scientists be mistaken? And what about the brilliant works of inventors and fiction writers who were ahead of their time? Their suggestions once seemed impossible. These authors were declared obsessed, abnormal, or dreamers at best. And today we admire their courage to be different. So what is the deciding factor of what is normal and what is not?
A table might be perceived as a wooden object with delineated edges and a solid texture, and our brain already has a vision of what it is about, what it is for, and how we can use it. If the act of perception leads to the same or roughly the same results for most of the biological organisms living in the world, then probably there is a conditionally accepted norm. That is the most common variant of perception.
These blots of paint are the famous images by Rorschach. They are one of the tests for the study of the psyche and its disorders. The task of the subject is to pick up the association created by the brain. It can be an image or an idea, a man, an animal, or a mythical creature, stationary or moving. So what do you see, say, in this picture? A bat? A monster's grin? Maybe a ritual mask of some tribe? And which of these associations will be the norm? The one that will get the most votes. If your option seems too eccentric to you, don't worry. The Rorschach test, like most others, doesn't indicate something is wrong with you, although it will help you draw certain conclusions. But back to how we perceive the surrounding reality and where the line is between norm and deviation. A regular sheet of blue paper. Hardly anyone will argue with this, but obviously, this sheet is blue. Anyone who agrees with this will automatically fall into the category of normal, at least on this point. But we already know that the concept of normal is relative.
Norms can change, but they will always exist. That's the point. It's impossible for everyone to have their own individual norms. It would be as though everyone were speaking their own language. We wouldn't understand each other in that case. I can invent my own language, but what is next? Who am I going to speak with? Myself? The same applies to norms. We can't do anything about it.
What if I said this blue color sounds like the note E? Don't laugh. It turns out that there are people who, unlike most of us, hear colors and see sounds. This special abnormal perception is called synesthesia.
Flu. It's a phenomenon that reflects the perception, not of a single elementary property, but connects several properties. For example, the French poet Arthur Rimbaud perceived letters painted in colors. He could say that the letter A is black, the letter E is white, another letter is blue. That is, his perception was formed like that. It is particular to creative people. It is, in fact, a reflection of their non-trivial view of life.
Creativity, a thirst for search, and curiosity often give rise to the desire to do something extraordinary. Such people find it difficult to stay within the norm. Walking on coals is a famous phenomenon. Every time we hear about it, we imagine a yoga master or at least a person specially trained for it. Well, in fact, how can an ordinary person walk on hot coals and remain completely unharmed?
In France, scientists even carried out an experiment. They tested the thin sections of toughened tissue on volunteers' heels with the idea that maybe this tissue doesn't burn. Maybe that's why a person can walk on hot coals, because their tissue doesn't burn. But they put that tissue on coals, and it burned down. I've walked on burning coals more than 200 times. I do it from time to time, and I do it consciously, because this is a very unique, very interesting procedure.
Two people are involved in our experiment. One has already repeatedly walked on hot coals, and the second is an absolute beginner without any preparation. We are quite sure that the first participant will be just fine. As for the second, we wish him the best of luck.
Okay, don't rush. Lightly touch the coals with your feet. Yes, they burn a little. Careful, okay?
According to an experienced instructor, you need to believe that walking on coals is possible in order to do it. But to overcome the fear of pain is not so easy, whatever you are told.
So go. Faster.
Truth be told, just believing isn't enough here.
Once again, I'd like to say, don't try this without a specialist, because you can only do it in a trance state.
Whether it is a trance or self-hypnosis or just a skillful application of the laws of physics, it doesn't really matter. The main and most surprising thing is that it works. What seems dangerous and impossible for many people is quite real for a few. Somehow, our brain in certain situations allows or helps our body to do the most incredible things. It turns out that everyone can walk on coals. It is absolutely not necessary to have any special abilities or train for a long time in order to do this. Each of us has what is necessary for it. But will it be just as easy for us to walk on air or on water? Alas, our brain only controls the world within us. The world outside and the laws of nature are beyond its control. Natural disasters, catastrophes, animal attacks. In extreme situations, in an affective state, a person sometimes does what he or she is incapable of doing under normal conditions. Why does that happen? Each of us has something that resembles a speed limit. You can drive faster, but it's dangerous and unsafe. But sometimes, at a critical moment, what limits a person turns off, and they do the impossible because it will help them survive.
In an extreme situation, the world no longer exists around us. We act unconsciously. What does that mean? It means that consciousness always acts as a kind of censor, as a corrector. When the world around someone stops and he or she uses their unconscious, natural, genetically inherited abilities, he or she has the opportunity to do a lot. It is in this type of situation that the control of consciousness is turned off.
There have been many stories of people who suddenly had enormous strength, speed, and endurance. As a rule, this happens only in incredibly extreme and stressful situations and for a very short time. When the danger is past, consciousness reactivates its control. And that's okay. But sometimes consciousness plays evil jokes on us, which in some cases even lead to pathology. Good evening, Alexander. Why do you think some people are called abnormal? Well, I don't know. Maybe some people count lampposts on the road, talking to themselves like you're doing right now. After all, sometimes it happens that there are several personalities living in one person, like a Russian doll. The American criminal Billy Milligan was tried for serious crimes he didn't commit. More precisely, the person who appeared before the court hadn't committed them. It had been done by his other selves. Psychiatrists counted about 24 other selves. As a result of mental and physical upheavals in childhood, a protective mechanism had emerged. There were other personalities, and Milligan could hide behind them, figuratively speaking.
What does the psychological analysis of such people show? It shows that certain psychological problems form before the person was born. When the mother was worried or anxious, when the mother had to endure fear or horror, it became part of her child. Then the child, filled with these fears and horrors, is born into this world. And then people in this world notice that he is somewhat different. Either he is thoughtful, or he is just silent, or he is closed off. And then comes the second self, or a mental state that controls the person's actions and deeds. And over time, it can aggravate. After all, the person experiences stress, shock, agitation, and unrest more and more often, and it increases. And more than one personality can develop in this person over time.
Surprisingly, each of them can have their own skills and abilities. They can play musical instruments, know martial arts techniques, speak several foreign languages, but the person has never been trained in these skills. There are a lot of hypotheses why this happens. However, science remains categorical on the matter.
I think it happens because we have certain associations in our subconscious, spontaneously. When we make an unexpected decision to do something, I think it is still the work of our subconscious with the information that is already there. Someone can be good at learning foreign languages and that person starts speaking another language fluently shortly after he started learning it. But that doesn't mean that he was born with it. Most likely, his subconscious or his neural structure was already predisposed to it, and a small amount of information that's been added is easily absorbed, and indeed, the person learns the language faster and can speak it better. But I don't think that anyone, including myself, can start speaking Hindi for no reason at all, because I haven't studied it and there's no way that I can just start speaking it.
But a pathologically ill psyche is not required in order to have extraordinary abilities.
Kazi mahan zi on kuntuizen poka minekat zitamaya. Kazin han zin kapitalizen poika.
How difficult. Sounds like a tongue twister. These letters and syllables seem impossible to pronounce. I doubt I could ever learn this language.
Minikan si listen purul using ya untim impar.
But there are people who can learn and easily speak more than 2 or 3 foreign languages. They can speak 5, 10, or even more, and without needing to. To them, it doesn't matter what language they learn, Finnish, Arabic, or Japanese, they are all easy. Some people only need a month or even a week to master a new language, and some even claim that they simply know a certain language, but cannot explain where it came from.
First of all, it is genetic memory. We all have a mother and a father. They also have parents, and their grandparents also have parents. That is, the practical amount of information that is transmitted to a person grows exponentially. After all, your ancestors lived 2,000 years ago. Where did they live? You don't know. You can't trace it. So it's likely that some of your ancestors lived in Arab countries, for example. Some of your ancestors live somewhere else.
Indeed, such hypotheses were put forward in the 19th century, but now they are irrelevant. Knowledge of language is not transmitted genetically. People are created that way. We always look for explanations of what is happening. Our consciousness does not allow blank spots, and therefore it fills in the gaps, so to speak, with what is at hand.
There is a violation of perception which is related to greater distortions. There are illusions when we see an object, but perceive it differently. Children often see different creatures, ghosts, in ordinary objects. Yeah, that's an illusion. It might occur under conditions which we consider normal, as well as with severe pathological disorders.
So in and of themselves, illusions are not a sign of developing mental illness. After all of us in childhood read tales about a terrible witch or an evil stepmother. And too vivid an imagination can, under contingent circumstances, revive them. Another thing is hallucinations. Unlike with illusions, when we see a real object differently than it really is, with hallucinations there is no need for an object at all. This is only the result of our brain activity, and in most cases, it is pathological.
When there are no sounds in reality, but a person hears them, it is due to the fact that active brain markers such as dopamine and serotonin cause excitement in these areas, an increase in the number of these mediators, and as a result, an increase of the receptor activity of the area, which points out disease. So if the thyroid gland function is disturbed, certain hormones increase and we get certain effects: tachycardia, pallor sweating, weight gain or decrease, dilation or narrowing of the pupils. The same thing happens in this case. Receptors of the central nervous system get stimulated in a particular area.
From a scientific look at the brain and the psyche, hallucinations are not the norm. And in this sense, the famous mathematician John Nash wasn't a normal person. He suffered from schizophrenia for almost his entire life. But this did not prevent him from becoming a Nobel Prize winner and gaining worldwide recognition.
The subconscious is like a repository of all the information that a person possesses, including genetic, of course. This is how we determined what consciousness is. That is, consciousness is here and now in this real world. And the subconscious is, first of all, our memory, including our genetic memory. Strange as it may seem, our subconscious is not only the past and the present, it is also the future, according to some of our greatest and most famous scientists.
By the way, there are no absolutely normal people. Psychiatrists like to joke that there are only under-examined people. In all seriousness, our inner world is largely determined by the subconscious. Is it possible to penetrate into its depths and thus to control our abilities and even our destiny? A no-contact fight. It sounds like a fantasy. Is it possible to win a fight without ever entering into direct contact with the opponent? From the sidelines, it looks like a well-prepared performance. But why do some researchers believe that this is, in fact, a martial art and has existed for a long time?
The art of contactless combat was revived by a famous Russian saint. In olden times, it was called Slavic salvation fighting. What is Slavic salvation fighting? This was a way of life for our great ancestors. It is a way of life indeed. How to build a house, how to bring up children, how to educate them. It also includes a way to train the military. When Dmitry Donskoy, a prince of Moscow in the 14th century, received a blessing from the saint, the latter gave him 400 men for his ambush regiment. And the outcome of the war that Donskoy fought was decided by the ambush regiment.
Teacher and pupil practice techniques many times. They literally feel each other at a distance. But is it only about training, or is there something more?
Lack of contact is not in itself a lack of action. By creating certain opportunities, and most importantly, threats to the attacker, we force him to move in a certain way. And this is what captures him, although it seems to him that he is moving independently. In fact, we use a kind of substitution of concepts. In addition, there are certain psychophysiological factors that we use actively, but there's no miracle to them. I'm going to push hard. Try to resist with all your might. Good. It's hard to move you. Now, you resist too. Yes.
Well, do you know why this has happened? What's the trick? Do you think it's hypnosis or an Eastern spiritual practice? Rather, it's a knowledge of physiology and psychology. What brings him towards you, Igor?
Conditional and unconditional reflex activity is pulling him in my direction. At first, we make real physical impact on the person, and he prepares for it. He feels this tension. And then we simulate our impact exactly, but we don't touch him. And the body reacts, prepares for this exposure, and falls forward.
Okay, wait, you said that as if he is not a living organism, but an inanimate object that doesn't understand anything. Why are you giving in?
I understand what is happening, but I can't control it.
So you don't control it?
No, there's an external force.
Yes, so you use psychophysiological laws more than physical ones.
Yes, physiology and psychology are involved to a great extent, of course. And it may be a good tool, but we must understand that I'm not shooting death rays. We can try to do it with you now.
Let's do it.
Good. Stand in Dimitri's place.
So, wait, how?
Okay, steady yourself, move your legs slightly further
way,
away,
right?
stand firmly. Yes, resist with all your might. Okay, I can move you a bit, but it takes a lot of effort. And now I do this, and your reflex is activated. You feel the fall.
Yes, I felt it. Okay.
As if you were already knocked down.
But back to the question, is it possible to penetrate our subconscious? Of course it is. To do this, there are many techniques and methods, including pharmacological. I'm just watching the changing numbers and pictures on the screen. You might ask, how is it possible to understand what's in my head? It turns out that the brain's reactions to these pictures can reveal a lot about what is hidden in my subconscious.
That is, the visual analyzer makes a record, and the brain's response is recorded. But the person doesn't have time to realize what it is they're seeing right in front of them in such a short period of time. Why? It takes 10 to 14 milliseconds for stimulus information to be presented. This exposure can be compared to, say, a situation when a person is driving down the road through a forest. If he's driving at high speed, he knows he's got a forest on both sides. But he won't be able to see a single tree separately.
Hypnosis, neuro-linguistic programming, psychotronic weapons. Science has to establish which methods really exist and work and which methods are just a myth. However, it doesn't matter if extraordinary abilities and skills fit into the norm or not. They are so rare because we can solve most of the tasks in everyday life without their help.
Buddha and a yogi met at a river crossing. The yogi asked Buddha, "Why are you waiting for the ferry? You are Buddha. You can walk on water." And Buddha said, "What for? I'll wait for the ferry." The yogi said to him, "Well, look at how I can walk on water." And he crossed the river, and Buddha took the ferry. On the other side, they met. The yogi, who looked pleased with himself, asked Buddha, "Did you see me walking on water?" Buddha said, "Yes, of course." "How much time did it take you to learn how to walk on water?" "My whole life," the man said. "You see my point. It took me just a half rupee to get across the river."
Society has always avoided and oppressed those who, by their behavior or abilities, differed from the majority. Some deserved it, others did not. So how abnormal are these people? Let professionals answer this question. Being different doesn't mean being dangerous or crazy. Perhaps it is a gift that will benefit all mankind.